Agatha Raisin and the Fatal Fragrance. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Jane, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for another captivating tale. Before we dive in, I'd love to get to know you a little better. What's one hobby or passion that brings you joy? Are you into baking, painting, gardening, or perhaps something completely unexpected? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe. It will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Chapter 1. A Scented Surprise. Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table, the morning sun slanting through the lace curtains and casting delicate patterns across the polished oak. The kettle had just stopped its steady whistling, and a gentle swirl of steam curled from her cup of Earl Grey. Outside, Carsely village stirred slowly. A robin hopped across the dew-speckled lawn, and the distant chime of the church clock punctuated the quiet calm. Agatha inhaled the familiar aroma of her tea, feeling the comfort of routine settle over her like a soft shawl. The morning had promised serenity, a gentle start to what she expected to be an ordinary day. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Frowning, she set down her cup and padded across the floorboards in her sensible slippers. On the doorstep lay a small, precisely wrapped package. No return address, no name, just a neatly tied ribbon holding an envelope to the top. Agatha's brow arched in curiosity, a familiar tingle of anticipation brushing across her nerves. Packages at her door were rare, and unannounced deliveries even rarer. With careful fingers, she carried the parcel inside, setting it on the table beside her tea. The ribbon was soft, almost silken, and smelled faintly of roses. She untied it slowly, savoring the little ritual of discovery. Inside lay a single bottle of perfume, its glass delicate and curvaceous, catching the sunlight like liquid crystal. The stopper was cut with precision, a tiny gem embedded at its center, hinting at elegance and expense. Agatha turned it in her hands, noting the weight, the craftsmanship, and the subtle shimmer in the amber liquid. Something about it felt unusual. She uncorked the bottle with a cautious twist. A wave of fragrance rose immediately, filling the kitchen with floral notes layered in complexity. Jasmine, rose, and something she couldn't quite name mingled in a delicate dance. But beneath the sweetness there was a faint undercurrent, something sharp, almost medicinal, that prickled the edges of her senses. Her lips pressed together in thought. Few things escaped her notice, and her intuition whispered that this perfume carried a hidden message, a story she was not yet privy to. Agatha circled the table, holding the bottle under the morning light, observing it from every angle. She wondered who might send such a gift. Her mind ran through possibilities: a well-meaning admirer, a secret admirer, or perhaps something more sinister. The question hung in the air, mingling with the perfume itself. She tapped the glass lightly, as if expecting a reply, and then set it back down with deliberate care. Her cat, Marmalade, padded into the kitchen, tail high, sniffing the air with keen interest. He circled the package once, twice, and then gave a small, disapproving meow before settling on the windowsill. Agatha smiled. Even Marmalade seemed to sense that this was no ordinary delivery. The morning sun climbed higher, and the village outside continued its gentle awakening. But inside Agatha's kitchen, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. There was curiosity now, tinged with the smallest edge of apprehension. Something had arrived at her doorstep that promised beauty, yet hinted at danger. Her instinct stirred, the first thread of intrigue weaving itself into her orderly life. She knew, without fully understanding why, that this perfume was only the beginning of a story that would soon demand her attention. Agatha sipped her tea, eyes lingering on the bottle.
The delicate scent lingered in the air, teasing her senses and pulling her into thought. Who had sent it, and why? And what secrets were concealed beneath that alluring, unsettling fragrance? She felt the familiar spark of investigation ignite, a quiet thrill of anticipation curling in her chest. Today, the ordinary had shifted, and Agatha Raisin was, as always, ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead.
Agatha was still pondering the mysterious perfume when a faint tapping at the door drew her attention. She peered through the window, only to see the village cloaked in a delicate veil of fog, the kind that softened edges and made familiar streets seem almost dreamlike. Stepping outside, she was greeted by a figure who emerged from the mist, a young woman, carrying a small wicker basket filled with flowers. Her eyes darted nervously, and she seemed to hesitate before raising a hand in greeting. "Good morning," the woman said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the fog. I have something for you." She extended the basket toward Agatha, though the contents were less important than the air of urgency surrounding her. Agatha's brow arched in polite curiosity, her fingers brushing the woven handle as she took it. The flowers were ordinary enough, bright carnations and daisies, but there was a note tucked neatly among them, sealed with a tiny wax emblem she didn't recognize. Who sent these?" Agatha asked, tilting her head. The young woman glanced over her shoulder, as if afraid someone might be watching, before lowering her voice. I was asked to deliver them. Someone who admires your charity work. But they wanted me to warn you about the perfume. It's not what it seems." Her words stumbled over each other, like leaves blown in a gust of wind, and a chill ran down Agatha's spine. "The perfume?" Agatha asked, her hand unconsciously moving toward the bottle that still sat on her kitchen table. "What could possibly be wrong with a gift?" The young woman's eyes flicked nervously to the mist-shrouded village, and then back to Agatha. "I'm not sure. I can't say more. Just be careful. Trust your instincts. That's all I can tell you." Her voice had an edge of fear beneath the politeness, a tension that hinted at hidden danger. Agatha studied the messenger for a long moment, noting the slight tremor in her hands, the nervous twitch at the corner of her mouth, the way her gaze darted like a bird ready to take flight. There was honesty in the fear, yes, but also a hint of uncertainty, making it impossible to know whether the warning was genuine or a misdirection. Still, the perfume, with its unsettling undercurrent, now seemed more ominous than ever. The young woman nodded once, briefly, and turned toward the fog-shrouded lane. She carried herself with hesitant determination, vanishing almost as quickly as she had appeared, swallowed by the morning mist. Agatha lingered in the doorway, the echo of the soft tapping still in her ears, the scent of damp earth and flowers mingling in the crisp air. The village felt quieter now, not just because of the fog, but because an invisible tension had settled over it, threading through the gentle morning calm. Back inside, Agatha placed the basket and note on the table beside the perfume. Her mind raced through possibilities. Who might want to send a warning? And why now, of all mornings? She ran a finger over the delicate petals of a carnation, feeling the warmth of the sun filtered through the fog outside, yet feeling the prickling unease at the edges of her senses. Even in the peaceful village, there was a shadow now, something unspoken that needed unraveling. Marmalade jumped onto the table, circling the basket, before curling up beside it, eyes half closed but alert. Agatha smiled wryly. Even he seemed aware that the ordinary calm of her life had been punctured, that intrigue had arrived on the misty doorstep, wrapped in flowers and warning. Settling back with her tea, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, though her thoughts refused to slow. The perfume, the mysterious messenger, the cryptic warning, they were threads in a tapestry only she could begin to untangle. The charm of Carsely, softened by fog and morning light, now carried a hint of menace, and Agatha Raisin felt the familiar thrill of curiosity ripple through her. Today's ordinary morning had quietly shifted into something far more compelling.
Chapter 2. Whiffs of Danger. Agatha Raisin set out from her cottage with the perfume carefully wrapped in a soft cloth, tucked under her arm. The village of Carsely was waking up, its cobblestone streets glistening faintly with morning dew, and shopkeepers arranging their wares in cheerful disorder. Normally, Agatha would have strolled with a sense of calm, savoring the morning air and greeting familiar faces, but today her mind was preoccupied. The mysterious fragrance lingered in her thoughts, an elusive puzzle she felt compelled to solve. Each step carried a twinge of curiosity, tinged with a small, thrilling unease. Her first stop was the tiny perfumery tucked between a bakery and a florist. The bell chimed softly as she entered, and a warm blend of lavender and sandalwood greeted her. Behind the counter, Mrs. Dunsmore, the proprietor, looked up from a delicate glass vial she was polishing. "Agatha, what brings you here so early?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Agatha placed the bottle on the counter, careful not to spill a drop of its amber liquid. "I've come to ask about this," she said, twisting the stopper lightly so that the scent wafted between them. Mrs. Slightly, and her smile faltered. "Ah, that's a rare one," she murmured, lowering her voice. "I've only ever seen a handful of these in my lifetime. It's a dangerous formulation, created by an old perfumer who, well, it has a rather dark reputation." She leaned closer, lowering her voice further, and Agatha could feel the weight of the words settle around her. "Dark reputation?" Agatha prompted, raising an eyebrow. Mrs. Dunsmore nodded, glancing around as if the shop itself might overhear. "It's said that a few who wore it suffered illnesses, some quite sudden. There were whispers of deaths, though records are scarce. The scent is enchanting, but it's not innocent." She studied Agatha's reaction carefully, as though gauging her capacity for handling unpleasant truths. Agatha inhaled gently, noting the intricate layers of jasmine and rose, then the faint, almost metallic edge beneath. Her throat itched slightly, and a tickle of dizziness reminded her to step outside for fresh air. She frowned, realizing that the perfume's effect was not merely olfactory. There was something in it that interacted with the body in subtle ways. A shiver ran down her spine when she thought of the young florist's warning from yesterday. Perhaps it had been no exaggeration. Leaving the shop, Agatha walked slowly through the village, eyes flicking from shop windows to cobblestones to passing pedestrians. The normally familiar streets now carried a hint of scrutiny, a sense that someone might be watching her, noting her every move. Even the baker's cheerful greeting felt slightly off, as if layered with curiosity that bordered on suspicion. She made a mental note to be more aware of the usual faces in unusual context. Her next stop was a small library tucked behind the town hall, where she consulted old tomes and faded documents about perfumes, formulas, and anecdotal accounts of mysterious illnesses. Notes on rare scents, chemical compositions, and anecdotal accounts of mysterious illnesses filled her notebook. Every reference she uncovered reinforced the idea that this perfume had a history of secrecy, danger, and subtle menace. The amber liquid in her hand was no longer merely beautiful. It carried an echo of something sinister. By mid-morning, Agatha returned to her cottage, the village now fully alive with its daily rhythms. She placed the bottle carefully on her table, running a hand over its smooth surface. The ordinary charm of Carsely had shifted subtly. Something in her cozy world was now tinged with unease. Agatha Raisin, curious, alert, and slightly anxious, realized she had only begun to uncover the web surrounding the perfume, and that the story it carried was far darker than its delicate aroma suggested.
Agatha Raisin returned to her cottage with a restless curiosity buzzing in her mind. The perfume rested on the kitchen table, gleaming in the afternoon light, as if daring her to unlock its secrets. She poured herself a fresh cup of tea and settled into her favorite chair,
letting the warmth seep into her hands while her thoughts raced. The earlier visits to the perfumery and the library had revealed unsettling hints, but the puzzle still felt incomplete. Something about the bottle demanded attention beyond mere observation, and she suspected there was more than just fragrance at play. Marmalade, her round ginger tabby, hopped gracefully onto the table, his tail curling in perfect symmetry. He sniffed at the bottle with exaggerated curiosity, nudging it with a soft paw, and then, with surprising dexterity, pawed at the cloth wrapping that still partially covered it. Agatha watched him with a bemused expression. "Well, you seem to have taken a professional interest," she murmured. Marmalade's green eyes gleamed with the faint suggestion that he, too, suspected the perfume held secrets. Then, with a flick of his paw, the cloth shifted just enough to reveal a small folded piece of paper tucked beneath the stopper. Agatha leaned forward, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't noticed it before. Carefully, she retrieved the note and unfolded it, revealing a message written in fine, looping handwriting. The words were sparse, cryptic, yet unsettling. "Beware the charm beneath the scent. The festival approaches, and not all who smile are friends. Watch closely." Her eyes narrowed as she reread the note. It was brief, but it carried weight, the reference to the upcoming village festival, the same event that had been mentioned in whispers by Mrs. Dunsmore and hinted at by the young florist, made her pulse quicken. Whoever had sent the perfume was aware of her routines, aware that she would encounter it in her own home, and had designed this little breadcrumb of warning deliberately. Marmalade meowed as if impatient for her to act, nudging the note with his paw until it slid across the table. Agatha laughed softly, a sound that mixed amusement with relief. The cat's curiosity had turned fortuitous, giving her a tangible lead where she had only suspicion before. She picked up the note once more, studying the handwriting, the choice of words, and even the subtle pressure marks on the paper. Every detail seemed to whisper hints, clues carefully embedded for the perceptive eye. Her mind shifted into planning mode. She would attend the festival, observe the attendees, and keep a keen eye on anyone displaying unusual behavior. The note suggested deception, perhaps even danger, and Agatha felt the familiar thrill of anticipation that came with a promising mystery. Yet she also smiled at the absurdity of relying on a cat as an investigative partner. Marmalade stretched luxuriously, tail flicking, as if to approve of the plan. Afternoon light slanted through the lace curtain, and the village beyond her windows looked tranquil and unassuming. The quaint cottages, neatly trimmed gardens, and quiet cobblestone streets were at odds with the sense of foreboding curling in her chest. Agatha realized that beneath this cozy exterior, someone was plotting, weaving a story that had chosen her as its central observer or participant. The perfume was no random gift. It was a signal, a clue, and perhaps even a warning. With Marmalade perched beside her, and the note safely tucked into her notebook, Agatha set about preparing for the festival. She would dress with understated elegance, blend with the crowd, and let her observations guide her. The day had started quietly, with tea and contemplation, but now it carried the electric thrill of anticipation, the promise of intrigue, and the delicate tension that she both loved and thrived upon. Agatha Raisin, thoughtful, alert, and slightly amused, was ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead.
Chapter 3. Secrets at the Soiree. The village green was a riot of color, dotted with white tents, bunting fluttering in the soft summer breeze, and tables laden with pastries, lemonade, and delicate finger sandwiches. Agatha Raisin stepped lightly across the grass, her heels clicking softly on the wooden boards that formed a makeshift walkway. The annual Carsley summer soiree was in full swing, a bright celebration of community and charm. Music from a small string quartet floated across the air, mingling with laughter and the scent of fresh flowers. Agatha adjusted her sun hat,
and allowed a small smile. This was the perfect setting to blend, observe, and perhaps uncover the mysteries that lingered just beneath the cheerful surface. Familiar faces greeted her warmly. Mrs. Pritchard, with her habitual floral scarf, complimented Agatha's dress, while the vicar raised a polite nod from across the fountain. Yet even amid the pleasantries, Agatha's keen eyes caught fleeting glances, subtle shifts in posture, and whispers exchanged behind cupped hands. The perfume, now carefully stored in her handbag, seemed almost to hum with its own quiet importance, as if it recognized the company it was keeping. She felt a twinge of anticipation, a delicate thread of curiosity that wrapped around her thoughts. A waiter passed, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. A guest nearby gestured with a hand, causing a flute to wobble and tip, spilling a golden liquid across the crisp white tablecloth. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Agatha's attention was drawn elsewhere. Behind a row of sunflowers, a figure slipped past, glancing toward her with a hurried, almost guilty air. She narrowed her eyes, noting the familiar posture of someone trying to remain unnoticed while observing the room. The incident seemed minor to others, yet Agatha's instincts whispered that no movement here was truly accidental. Polite conversation continued around her, discussions of gardens, charity events, and the success of the village bake sale. But Agatha's mind ticked with subtle calculations. Every interaction held potential meaning, every smile a possible mask. A group of villagers huddled under the shade of an oak tree, speaking in hushed tones, casting glances toward the pavilion. Agatha moved closer under the guise of adjusting her gloves, catching fragments of their discussion. "Did you see her this morning? Cannot trust everything she brings." The words were incomplete, but suggested caution, a hidden agenda, and secrets that needed unraveling. Even the music seemed to take on a new character, the strings' gentle melody contrasting with the faint edge of tension threading through the gathering. Agatha allowed herself a sip of lemonade, scanning the crowd as though each expression, gesture, and laugh could reveal the larger story. The village's charm remained intact, the warmth of sun, the chatter, the scent of roses, but now there was a sharp undertone, a quiet awareness that something delicate and dangerous might be concealed amid the festivities. Marmalade, perched discreetly on the edge of her purse, twitched his ears at every whisper and clink of glass. Agatha smiled faintly at the cat's alertness, appreciating its small but valuable presence. There was comfort in the familiar companionship, a sense that even amid intrigue she was not alone. By mid-afternoon, the sun had climbed high, illuminating the scene with a golden glow, yet the undercurrent of curiosity persisted. Agatha navigated the event with practiced grace, engaging in polite greetings, observing every interaction, and letting her instincts guide her. She noted the faintest expressions of unease, the subtle exchanges of glances, and the tiny, almost invisible cues that suggested concealed intentions. The evening promised social delight, but Agatha's mind remained attentive, weaving together observations like threads in a tapestry that might reveal secrets waiting to be uncovered. As she stepped toward the refreshment table, Agatha Raisin allowed herself a brief, satisfied thought. In this lively, familiar, yet subtly charged setting, she felt the thrill of mystery alongside the comfort of community. The perfume, the whispers, and the fleeting figures all hinted at a story waiting to unfold, and she was ready to follow each clue with patience, wit, and keen observation.
The soiree was in full swing when Agatha Raisin felt a sudden, unfamiliar scent brush past her senses. At first, she assumed it was part of the summer air, mingling with roses and fresh bread from the nearby stalls. But as she turned her head, a faint wave of something richer, deeper, and unsettling reached her nose, prickling the edges of her awareness. Her stomach fluttered, and a mild dizziness teased the corners of her mind. The perfume, the very same amber fragrance she had been examining at home,
was deliberately being introduced into her immediate vicinity. She glanced around subtly, eyes narrowing as she observed the guests. Most carried on with cheerful conversation, oblivious to the scent or choosing to ignore it. A few, however, exhibited tiny, telling reactions, a fluttered hand to the throat, a faint cough, a flicker of discomfort in their expression. One woman, with an elaborate hat adorned with daisies, tilted her head curiously toward Agatha, as if measuring her response. Another gentleman, standing near the fountain, smiled faintly, amusement glinting in his eyes as he sniffed the air. Even in a crowd that seemed perfectly ordinary, the subtle ripples of awareness revealed that something unusual and potentially dangerous was afoot. Agatha took a measured step aside, holding her clutch close and inhaling deeply, steadying herself. Her mind raced through possibilities. The perfume was not simply a gift, it was a message, an instrument, a signal. Someone here had intentionally tested it, gauging reactions and watching her specifically. Her instincts sharpened, honed by years of observation and curiosity, and she began forming a mental map of the attendees, assigning degrees of suspicion based on posture, glances, and subtle behavioral cues. She noted the group gathered under the oak tree, whispering with lowered voices, casting quick looks toward her direction. A young man with an air of casual confidence laughed quietly, tilting his head to a cluster of guests who seemed unaware of the subtle drama unfolding around them. A pair of older ladies, sharing a tart and a conversation, smiled knowingly at each other, their smiles almost too precise. Every gesture, every flick of the hand, every shift in stance could be a clue or a misdirection. Agatha catalogued them all with silent precision, her mind like a well-tuned instrument, picking out the faintest vibrations in a symphony. Even Marmalade, perched unobtrusively on the edge of a tablecloth-covered stall, twitched his ears and sniffed the air with equal attentiveness. Agatha smiled faintly at his instinctive vigilance. The cat's awareness reminded her that even small details, easily overlooked by the casual observer, could be significant. She let her gaze wander again, absorbing the lively yet subtly charged scene. The sunshine, the laughter, the delicate clinking of glasses, all contrasted sharply with the underlying tension introduced by that single, deliberate spray of perfume. Agatha realized, with a quiet thrill of apprehension, that the sender was close, perhaps even among the crowd now, watching her reaction with interest. The perfume was not only dangerous, but also a means of communication, and she had just received the first overt signal of intent. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the sharp edge of curiosity and determination. As she sipped her lemonade to steady herself, Agatha Raisin began mentally planning her next moves. She would observe discreetly, note every unusual behavior, and allow the festival to continue outwardly uninterrupted. The soiree would remain cheerful and charming for most attendees, but underneath the surface, a quiet investigation had begun. Each glance, each smile, each subtle twitch could be a clue or a misdirection. Agatha catalogued them all with silent precision, her mind like a well-tuned instrument, picking out the faintest vibrations in a symphony.
Chapter 4. Hidden Motives. Agatha Raisin leaned against the edge of a sunlit gazebo, her eyes scanning the bustling festival with a practiced attentiveness. Villagers laughed, exchanged pleasantries, and moved among the stalls, but beneath the cheerful veneer, subtle irregularities caught her attention. A man brushing crumbs from his sleeve glanced repeatedly toward the fountain, as though expecting someone. Two women exchanged a conversation in hushed tones, their heads bent close, lips moving in careful synchrony, punctuated by furtive glances at Agatha herself. Every gesture, however small, seemed loaded with potential meaning. She reached into her handbag and retrieved a small notebook, flipping it open to a blank page. Marmalade, still perched quietly on the edge of the table beside her, twitched an ear in silent approval. Agatha scribbled quick observations, shorthand notes that would help her connect the threads later. The man near the fountain, the whispering women, the fleeting figures of children running past, each became part of a mental map, a constellation of interactions that hinted at hidden agendas. Her gaze swept to the vicar, who was deep in animated conversation with Mrs. Pritchard. At first glance, their exchange appeared entirely innocuous, filled with laughter and subtle hand gestures. Yet Agatha noticed a slight tension in their shoulders, a hesitation in their smiles, as if some unspoken history hovered between them. The village, she realized, was a tapestry of relationships far more intricate than any newcomer might perceive. Beneath the cozy charm lay rivalries, secrets, and motives obscured by politeness and familiarity. A sudden movement caught her attention. A man with a straw hat and a sharp gaze slipped behind a stand of flower arrangements. He lingered briefly before turning back toward the crowd, carefully avoiding direct eye contact with anyone but Agatha. Her pen moved quickly, noting posture, gestures, and timing. Something about his actions suggested a deliberate observation, a silent scrutiny that mirrored her own. Was he connected to the mysterious perfume, or was he simply a curious attendee? The uncertainty fueled her curiosity and sharpened her senses. Nearby, a pair of children ran laughing past a table of pastries, knocking over a small vase in their excitement. The flowers tumbled to the ground, petals scattered in disarray. Most guests merely chuckled at the minor accident, but Agatha observed an older woman glance sharply at the chaos, her expression hardening for just a heartbeat before returning to polite attention. Tiny, almost imperceptible moments like these revealed fissures in the village's otherwise serene exterior. People's reactions, however small, could illuminate hidden priorities and loyalties if one looked closely enough. Agatha made a careful note of these interactions, combining her observations with intuition. The whispers she overheard suggested caution, the subtle gestures implied secrecy, and the almost imperceptible glances revealed unease. The village's charm remained intact, but under her attentive gaze, it became clear that danger or deceit could be lurking where least expected. Each detail, from a hesitant laugh to a pointed glance, became a piece of a larger puzzle she was determined to solve. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over Carsely's festival, Agatha closed her notebook briefly and allowed herself a moment to absorb the scene. The music, chatter, and laughter contrasted sharply with the quiet undercurrent of intrigue she had detected. She sipped her tea, marmalade curling beside her, and reflected on the delicate balance of charm and suspicion that now defined her afternoon. With journal in hand and eyes open, Agatha Raisin was ready to follow each whisper, observe every subtle gesture, and piece together the hidden motives that shaped the village she thought she knew so well.
Agatha Raisin had just finished jotting a few notes in her journal when a hesitant voice broke through the hum of conversation. "Excuse me, Miss Raisin." The words were quiet, almost swallowed by the cheerful chatter surrounding them. She looked up to see a young woman, her shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously between Agatha and the crowd. Something in the guest's manner immediately signaled unease, an urgency that seemed both genuine and fearful. "Of course," Agatha replied, inclining her head politely. "Shall we step over here, away from the noise?" She gestured toward the quieter edge of the pavilion, where a patch of shade offered some privacy. Marmalade, perched discreetly on her purse, gave a tiny, approving twitch of his tail. The guest leaned closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. I think you need to know something about the perfume," she said, glancing around as if expecting someone to overhear. "I can't tell everything, not yet, but it wasn't random. Someone wanted you to have it, to notice it. They're very careful, very deliberate." Agatha tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing with curiosity.
And who is they? Do you know? The young woman shook her head quickly, biting her lip. I don't. At least, not fully. I only know that it's linked to an event soon. Something that's supposed to happen here, at the festival. I was told to warn you, but that's all I know. I'm sorry, it's vague, but I can't risk saying more. Her hands twisted together nervously, betraying a mixture of guilt and fear. Agatha studied her carefully. The nervous energy was genuine, yet the guest's reluctance to speak suggested layers of caution, perhaps self-preservation. Agatha's mind worked quickly, weighing the words against the behavior. Who had instructed this confession? How much of it was true, and how much was shaped by fear? Every hesitation, glance, and choice of words became a potential clue. "You've done well to come," Agatha said, finally, her tone calm but firm. "Information, even partial, is valuable. Thank you for trusting me." She offered a reassuring smile, noting the young woman's shoulders relax slightly. "I'll take it from here, but keep your eyes open and be careful. There's more to this than meets the eye, and it's best to tread cautiously." The guest nodded, relief flickering across her features before she melted back into the crowd, leaving Agatha alone with her thoughts and Marmalade's quiet presence. The partial confession had deepened the mystery, adding both urgency and subtle tension. Whoever had orchestrated the perfume's arrival was methodical, leaving hints yet withholding full intent. Agatha returned to her notes, pen poised above the page. The social niceties of the festival continued around her, laughter and music masking the undercurrent of intrigue she now carried in her mind. She reflected on the guest's words, connecting them to the observations she had already made, the fleeting glances, whispered conversations, and the deliberate perfume incident. Even in the midst of the cheerful village festival, danger and deception had quietly inserted themselves into her day. Agatha Raisin's cleverness, perceptiveness, and patience would now guide her. Each detail, each hesitant confession, each cryptic hint formed pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve, one subtle revelation at a time. Chapter 5. Trails and Tangents. Agatha Raisin approached the outskirts of Carsely with quiet determination, the village now fading behind her as she followed a narrow, winding path lined with tall hedgerows. The summer breeze carried a faint floral tang, a hint of something both alluring and sharp that immediately caught her attention. Her instincts prickled. This was no ordinary scent drifting through the countryside. Marmalade padded alongside her, tail high, as if sharing in her cautious excitement. Ahead, partially obscured by ivy and the shadow of a leaning oak, she spotted a small, unassuming building. The windows were fogged, and a faint wisp of smoke curled from a crooked chimney. It looked ordinary enough at first glance, but Agatha's sharp eyes noticed signs of activity. A freshly turned patch of earth near the side door, footprints pressed into the soft soil, and the subtle glimmer of bottles stacked behind a half-drawn curtain. Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary shed. It was a workshop, a place where the perfume might be crafted, tested, and perhaps even weaponized. She crouched behind a low stone wall, observing without revealing herself. Through the dusty glass, figures moved with careful precision, handling vials and mixing powders, their gestures deliberate and measured. The amber liquid of the perfume gleamed under the dim interior light, and Agatha's heart leapt. This was the same scent that had infiltrated her home, triggered subtle discomfort, and carried with it an air of menace. Whoever operated this workshop was meticulous, secretive, and clearly skilled. Her mind raced as she took in the scene. Shelves lined with glass containers, each labeled with strange symbols, hinted at alchemical knowledge and careful experimentation. A faint chemical aroma mingled with floral notes, drifting out through a cracked window, confirming her suspicion that this place was central to the mystery surrounding the perfume. Agatha jotted mental notes, cataloging every detail. The number of individuals, the methods of handling the bottles, even the way they avoided direct contact with the liquid. Every movement was a clue, every glint of light on glass a potential piece of evidence. Suddenly, a figure paused near the doorway, peering outside as if sensing movement. Agatha froze, holding her breath, and Marmalade pressed against her leg, equally still. The moment passed without incident, the figure returning to the bottles inside, but the tension reminded her how careful she had to be. This workshop was a nexus of secret activity, and any mistake could reveal her presence. As she retreated slightly to a safer vantage point, Agatha allowed herself a quiet smile. The discovery was significant. She now had confirmation that the perfume was no random gift, but part of a deliberate, carefully orchestrated operation. Whoever orchestrated it had resources, skill, and intention, and she was now closer to understanding both the who and the why. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the ivy-clad walls and winding path. Agatha Raisin straightened, dusting off her skirt, and whispered to Marmalade, "We've found something, my curious companion. Now we just have to see where it leads." With careful steps, she retraced her path toward the village, mind alight with plans for observation, deduction, and the next move in a game she had only just begun to unravel.
Agatha Raisin's curiosity had grown too strong to remain on the outskirts, observing from a distance. With Marmalade tucked into the crook of her arm for warmth and moral support, she returned to the workshop under the guise of shadows, slipping through a side door that had been left slightly ajar. Inside, the room smelled sharply of chemicals and floral essences, an intoxicating mix that made her pulse quicken. Shelves lined with glass vials and brass instruments gleamed dimly under the muted light from a small window. Each object seemed purposeful, deliberate, a tool in the creation of something more than mere fragrance. Her attention was drawn to a tall wooden cabinet in the corner, its doors locked with an intricate brass keyhole. Agatha's eyes lit up with a mixture of excitement and caution. She had a feeling this cabinet held answers, proof, linking the perfume to the mysterious intentions she had been tracking. Drawing a deep breath, she examined the edges of the cabinet, noting scratches and smudges on the wood. Someone had been here recently, handling the contents with care. Whoever had designed the perfume's path had left behind fragments, and Agatha was determined to piece them together. After a careful search of nearby drawers and the surrounding floorboards, she discovered a small, hidden latch beneath the cabinet, cleverly concealed. A gentle push revealed a shallow compartment containing folded pieces of paper, yellowed with age. Agatha's heart thumped as she carefully unfolded the first fragment. The handwriting was delicate, cursive, almost artistic, and the words hinted at previous attempts to experiment with rare fragrances, mentions of sudden illnesses, cautionary notes, and mysterious recipients filled the pages. Each line added weight to her growing suspicion. The perfume had a long, shadowed history, and she was now holding evidence of that legacy. Another slip of paper fell from between the pages, a half-letter torn at the edges. Agatha read the contents slowly, noting references to dates, recipients, and obscure formulas. There were hints at someone who had been testing reactions for years, perhaps decades, observing and refining methods in secrecy. The connections were subtle but unmistakable. This was not merely a cosmetic creation, but part of a deliberate, ongoing pattern. She jotted mental notes in her notebook, cross-referencing the names and events with the incidents she had previously discovered. Marmalade pawed at a small envelope tucked behind the cabinet door, as if impatient for her to notice. Inside were more fragments, cryptic phrases like timed exposure, observe reactions, and the festival provides the perfect audience. Her pulse quickened. The message was now intensely personal. Someone was watching,
orchestrating events with precision, and she had become part of the plan. Carefully, she closed the cabinet, hiding the evidence once more. The room's quiet tension pressed against her awareness, but Agatha felt a surge of determination. Each piece of correspondence, each old recipe had drawn the outlines of the perpetrator's identity and motives. The danger was no longer abstract. It was close, deliberate, and potentially perilous. As she stepped toward the door, marmalade brushing against her ankles, Agatha Raisin knew that her next moves would require careful observation, courage, and unerring attention to the subtle signs of human behavior.
Chapter 6. Close Encounters. The night was quiet, the Carsely sky a deep indigo, stars glittering faintly through a thin veil of clouds. Agatha Raisin returned to her cottage with Marmalade padding softly at her heels, both eager for the comfort of warmth and routine after a day of observations and cautious deduction. The familiar scent of brewing tea and old wood should have been reassuring, yet the air inside her home felt oddly tense, charged with a subtle unease she couldn't immediately place. She set down her bag, careful not to disturb Marmalade, who immediately jumped onto the kitchen counter, sniffing around with his usual combination of curiosity and authority. That's when Agatha noticed it. A slight misalignment in the items on her side table. A picture frame shifted slightly off kilter, and the perfume, the very bottle that had sparked the chain of intrigue, was gone. Her breath caught and her pulse quickened. Someone had been here. Agatha moved quietly through the cottage, each step deliberate, scanning for more signs. A book lay open on the floor, pages ruffled as though hastily thumbed through. A small drawer in her writing desk, normally locked, was ajar, its contents disturbed. Marmalade meowed softly, brushing against her legs, as if sharing in her apprehension. The warmth and familiarity of her home now contrasted sharply with the reality of intrusion. Someone had entered, searched, and taken what they wanted. Her eyes caught a faint trace of perfume lingering in the air, a delicate amber note that had been her companion for days. The scent led her toward the window by the back garden, where the latch had been gently lifted and lowered again. Whoever had entered knew her routines, had handled her belongings carefully, and had left no overt fingerprints, only subtle hints, like a trail of breadcrumbs for the observant. Agatha's mind raced. She catalogued each detail, considering what the intruder's next move might be and why the perfume had been the target. She settled into her armchair with Marmalade curled beside her, forcing herself to remain calm. Her journal lay open on the table, and she began a meticulous account of what she had found. Every clue, shifted frame, ruffled pages, the faint scent in the air, was recorded with precision. Agatha considered the possibilities. Was this the same individual who had sent the perfume, or someone else entirely, with separate motives yet intersecting paths? The questions spiraled, each more pressing than the last, but her mind, sharp and practiced, began to form connections and anticipate intentions. Outside, the night remained still, the village cloaked in shadows and quiet. Inside, the contrast between the cottage's cozy interior and the threat that had violated its sanctuary heightened Agatha's awareness. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windowpane felt significant. She was alert, ready, yet also acutely aware of her own vulnerability. Marmalade's presence was a comforting counterpoint, his purring a steady rhythm amidst the heightened tension. Agatha closed her notebook with a sense of resolve. The intruder's visit had escalated the stakes dramatically. The perfume's disappearance was no longer a simple curiosity. It was an act of intention, a signal that someone was orchestrating events with care, testing boundaries, and observing her responses. She would need to move with caution, intelligence, and precision. Agatha Raisin, ever vigilant, felt the familiar thrill of danger mingled with determination. The night had revealed the proximity of the threat, and she would be ready for what came next.
Agatha Raisin sat at her writing desk, frowning over the empty space where the perfume bottle had once rested. Marmalade, ever perceptive, pawed at her slippers, demanding attention. She sighed, half amused, half exasperated. "Yes, yes, I know you're more observant than I am," she murmured. The cat's amber eyes glimmered with that familiar spark of mischief, as though he understood the gravity of the situation, or perhaps simply found it entertaining. As Agatha leaned forward to examine her notes, Marmalade leapt lightly onto the windowsill, scanning the shadows outside before nudging something small with his paw. She leaned over and gasped softly. There, tucked behind a loose brick in the sill, was a tiny glass vial no larger than her pinky finger. It was sealed with a delicate cork and bore a faintly handwritten label, a series of letters and numbers that seemed meaningless at first glance. The discovery sent a thrill through her, a mixture of excitement and relief. Marmalade had unwittingly led her to a clue left by the intruder, a breadcrumb deliberately or inadvertently forgotten. Agatha carefully removed the vial, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside shimmered with an almost golden hue, faintly reminiscent of the stolen perfume, yet different, subtle, mysterious, and full of potential meaning. She set the vial gently on the desk and examined the code on the label. 7R3, K12. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered to herself. Her mind immediately began the process of decoding, considering letter substitution, numerical patterns, and the possibility of initials or dates hidden within the sequence. Marmalade twitched his tail as if urging her onward. The moment was oddly comforting despite the tension. In the midst of danger, the small, comical intervention of her feline companion reminded her that the world could be both threatening and charming at the same time. Agatha chuckled softly. "You do realize, Marmalade, that you've just made this far more interesting," she said, as if confiding in him alone. The cat blinked slowly in return, his version of approval. She spread her notes across the desk, connecting recent events: the stolen perfume, the mysterious workshop, the cryptic letters found in the cabinet, and now this tiny glass vial. Each element formed a strand in a growing web, and the code was a knot she intended to untangle. Her analytical mind, ever meticulous, began to map possibilities, considering who could have left the vial and why. Was it a test, a taunt, or a critical piece of evidence? Even as night deepened outside, Agatha's determination brightened. The intruder had left her a trail, and Marmalade had unknowingly illuminated the path. With notebook open, pen poised, and cat perched confidently at her side, Agatha Raisin was ready to follow the trail wherever it led. Every subtle clue, every cryptic message, and every feline-assisted discovery brought her one step closer to unveiling the mystery and, she hoped, confronting the culprit before danger escalated further.
Chapter 7. Unveiling the Culprit. Agatha Raisin surveyed the village green with a calm composure that belied the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. The clues, the stolen perfume, the hidden workshop, the cryptic cabinet notes, and Marmalade's vial had all converged into a single tangible suspicion. She knew who had orchestrated the events, though she still lacked complete proof. Today, however, she intended to draw the culprit into a conversation that would reveal more than they anticipated. She spotted the suspect near the cafe terrace, casually sipping tea and engaged in what appeared to be idle chat. Agatha approached with measured steps, Marmalade trailing behind in his usual dignified manner. The suspect's eyes flicked toward her, betraying a flicker of surprise, but their smile remained poised and polite. Agatha's own expression was carefully neutral, blending courtesy with subtle authority, a balance she had perfected over years of observation and social navigation. "Good afternoon," she began, settling into a chair opposite the suspect. "What a beautiful day to enjoy tea in Carsely, isn't it?" Her tone was light, conversational, yet each word was carefully chosen to encourage openness while masking her underlying intent. Marmalade leapt onto her lap, purring, adding an innocuous charm to the scene. The suspect's smile faltered slightly. Yes, indeed, the weather is lovely. There was an edge of unease behind the practiced cordiality. Agatha noted the subtle shifts in posture, the tightening of hands around the cup, the brief glances toward the crowd as if seeking reassurance. Every gesture fed her growing certainty. "I've been thinking about the perfume you might have noticed," she said, casually, tilting her head as if musing aloud. "It has caused quite a stir recently, hasn't it? Such a rare scent, so unusual that one wonders how it came to be here." She allowed a faint, thoughtful pause, letting her words settle in the suspect's mind without forcing them into immediate response. The suspect shifted, clearly trying to maintain composure. I can't say I know much about it. It's simply a novelty. People talk too much." Agatha's lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile. "Ah, but people do talk, don't they? And sometimes even the smallest details reveal the largest truths. For example, a certain vial left behind, a coded label, even a cat's keen observation." She nodded toward Marmalade, who blinked serenely in response. "These things can be quite revealing if one pays attention." The suspect's eyes flickered, betraying a flicker of guilt or perhaps recognition. Agatha leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to a confidential tone. "It's curious, isn't it, how carefully crafted actions meant to remain unseen often leave the faintest traces. And those traces, tiny as they may seem, are sometimes enough to connect intentions with consequences." A pause stretched between them, heavy with unspoken realization. Agatha's calm demeanor, her subtle probing, and her gentle wit had created a psychological space where the suspect began to reveal more than intended. Words slipped out, half-denials mingled with explanations, each phrase a strand of truth carefully teased into the open. Agatha noted every nuance, her mental map of events crystallizing into clarity. By the time she rose from her chair, the conversation had achieved exactly what she had planned: confirmation of identity and motives, all without confrontation in anger or accusation. The social dance had allowed her to extract the truth with elegance, humor, and subtle persuasion. Marmalade leapt from her lap, brushing past the suspect as if claiming victory. Agatha smiled, inwardly satisfied. The pieces of the mystery were falling into place, and Carsley's delicate balance of charm and intrigue remained intact, at least for now.
Agatha Raisin stood in the sunlit drawing-room of the village hall, the culprit seated opposite her, shoulders tense, hands clasped tightly on the table. The crowd of curious onlookers, friends, neighbors, and casual festival-goers watched from a respectful distance, drawn by the subtle stir of intrigue in Carsely. Agatha's mind, sharp and deliberate, began to unfold the strands of deception she had so carefully traced. The time for subtle observation had ended. Now was the moment for clarity, revelation, and resolution. "You see," Agatha began, her tone calm, yet carrying a quiet authority, "the perfume was never meant as a mere gift or harmless novelty. Its design, its rare composition, and the circumstances of its delivery were all calculated for a single purpose: to manipulate, even incapacitate, an individual at the upcoming festival event." She paused, letting the words sink in, as attentive eyes followed every flicker of her expression. The culprit swallowed, their composure cracking ever so slightly.
Agatha continued, weaving together observations, evidence, and the clever deductions that had guided her throughout the investigation. From the hidden workshop on the outskirts of the village, to the coded messages, to the deliberate placement of the vial that Marmalade discovered, every step was orchestrated to test reactions, to measure responses, and ultimately to ensure that the perfume's effect would be perfectly timed. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers, though they remained respectfully quiet, sensing the gravity of the unfolding revelation. Agatha's gaze swept the room, landing briefly on familiar faces. Some were wide-eyed with curiosity, others relieved at the exposure of what had threatened their peaceful village. She allowed a faint smile, a gentle signal that order was being restored. "You see, my dear," addressing the culprit directly, "believed your careful planning would go unnoticed, that the subtleties of scent and secrecy could bypass observation, but you underestimated two things. First, the perceptive residents of Carsely, who notice even the smallest irregularities, and second," she bent slightly, allowing Marmalade to leap gracefully onto the table, tail high, "the vigilance of an extraordinarily clever cat." The culprit's shoulders slumped. The trap was exposed, the plan thwarted, and there was nowhere left to hide behind excuses or misdirection. Agatha explained the final pieces, the correspondence in the cabinet, the workshop's secret experiments, and the subtle behavioral tests during the earlier soirée. Each revelation confirmed how close the scheme had come to succeeding, yet how thoroughly it had been intercepted by careful observation and timely intervention. As the tension in the room eased, Agatha shifted the atmosphere with her characteristic charm. "Now, let us return to what matters most, the safety and enjoyment of our community. No harm has come to anyone, the perfume is secured, and the person intended to be targeted remains none the worse for her wear." A collective sigh of relief passed through the assembled villagers. Even the culprit, now subdued and contrite, could not help but allow a grudging respect for Agatha's ingenuity. Marmalade, ever dignified, twined around Agatha's ankles, his purring a reminder of the lighter side of triumph. Agatha glanced around, noting the familiar warmth and resilience of her village. The mystery had been solved, the danger neutralized, and life in Carsely could resume its cozy rhythms. Agatha Raisin allowed herself a final reflection, eyes drifting to the sunlight dancing across polished wooden floors and blooming flower arrangements. The perfume's danger had been revealed and contained, and through it all, curiosity, wit, and keen observation had preserved both safety and charm. Carsely would remember the incident with a mixture of relief, amusement, and admiration, and Agatha, ever the vigilant sleuth, could rest, at least for now, knowing her village was safe and her skills had once again prevailed.
Chapter 8. A Peaceful Morning. The morning sun streamed gently through the lace curtains of Agatha Raisin's cottage, casting warm patterns across the polished wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of fresh tea leaves and lingering hints of Marmalade's favorite treats, a comforting combination that seemed to ground her after the whirlwind of recent events. Agatha settled into her favorite armchair, a steaming crop of Earl Grey cradled in her hands, while Marmalade curled up lazily beside her, tail twitching contentedly. For the first time in days, she could breathe fully, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. She took a slow sip, savoring the familiar warmth and the faint aroma of bergamot, and allowed her mind to wander over the events that had unfolded. The mysterious perfume, the coded messages, the hidden workshop, all of it seemed almost unreal now, yet the lessons and the intrigue were etched clearly in her memory. Agatha smiled at the thought of the tiny vial that Marmalade had uncovered, imagining him taking full credit for the discovery in his own imperious way. "You do realize, Marmalade, that you may be the cleverest assistant in all of Carsely?"
The cat blinked slowly in response, as if acknowledging the compliment without any inclination to admit it outright. Her thoughts drifted to the people involved, the suspects and the social dynamics that had shaped the entire episode. Villagers who had seemed perfectly ordinary had revealed layers of ambition, anxiety, and curiosity, each contributing to the delicate balance of community life. Agatha mused on the cleverness required to navigate such interactions, not merely solving the mystery, but doing so while maintaining social grace and decorum. She sipped her tea again, reflecting on the subtle humor and irony that often accompanied human behavior, particularly when under pressure or observing hidden motives. The quiet stillness of the morning contrasted sharply with the suspense and tension of the past days, providing her with a sense of relief and satisfaction. Marmalade shifted, stretching luxuriously, before settling back into a curl against her lap, his gentle purring a steady reminder that the cottage remained a sanctuary. Agatha glanced around the room. The familiar trinkets, the neatly stacked books, and the small vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill, and appreciated the calm persistence of everyday life. Despite the extraordinary events, life's ordinary rhythms continued, grounding her in the cozy reality of home. She allowed herself a private chuckle, thinking of the culprit and their elaborate plans, now fully unraveled. The intricate scheme, the careful orchestration, and the dramatic moments of revelation now seemed almost theatrical, as if the village itself had staged a performance, with her as both audience and participant. Agatha reflected on the satisfaction of seeing the puzzle pieces align, the pleasure of matching observation with deduction, and the enduring charm of community resilience. Finally, she set the cup down on the small wooden table beside her and leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. Marmalade's presence, the warmth of the morning sun, and the lingering fragrance of tea and flowers created a perfect cocoon of comfort. Agatha Raisin allowed herself to enjoy the sense of accomplishment and tranquility, knowing that Carsely was safe once more, mysteries solved, and life restored to its gentle, comforting rhythm. The village outside hummed quietly with activity, and she felt both part of it and serenely a part. A vigilant observer finally afforded a moment of peace. As she opened her eyes and reached for another sip of tea, Agatha smiled softly to herself. The events of the past days would linger in memory, lessons learned mingling with gentle amusement. Marmalade twitched his whiskers in agreement, and together they basked in the soothing simplicity of a quiet morning, the cozy rhythm of home, and the satisfaction of a mystery elegantly resolved.
Agatha Raisin had just finished pouring herself a second cup of tea, the warmth seeping into her hands, when a faint knock at the door caught her attention. Marmalade's ears twitched immediately, and he padded to the entrance with careful curiosity. Agatha set down her cup and rose slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. Visitors at this hour were unusual, particularly on a calm morning such as this, and her investigative instincts nudged her forward. Opening the door, she found no one in sight. Instead, a small, neatly wrapped package rested on the doorstep, its presence both unexpected and intriguing. The wrapping was delicate, pale blue with a silver ribbon, suggesting care and thoughtfulness rather than malice. Agatha's brow arched as she knelt to examine it. The faint scent wafting from the package was instantly familiar, a floral note tinged with something faintly exotic. Her pulse quickened slightly. Was it simply a thoughtful gift, or something more? Marmalade leapt onto her shoulder, sniffing the air with exaggerated seriousness, as if he too recognized the potential significance of the delivery. Agatha chuckled softly, the tension of the past days easing into a gentle curiosity. "You're as suspicious as I am, aren't you, my furry companion?" she murmured. Together they lifted the package inside and settled at the table, her hands deftly undoing the silver ribbon. Inside lay a small vial, unmistakably a perfume sample, with a label written in neat, precise script. Unlike the previous vial, this one carried no overtly threatening aura. Still, Agatha noted the subtle undertones. There was an artful complexity here,
a hint of mystery that teased the senses without alarming them. She could not help but smile at the thoughtfulness and mischief behind it. Even in calmness, her world was never entirely predictable. As she turned the vial in her hands, Agatha's mind wandered. Who had left it? Was it simply a gesture of goodwill, a hint of admiration, or perhaps a playful challenge from someone who had observed her investigative exploits? The possibilities stretched outward like threads of a web, each tempting her imagination. Marmalade, sensing her contemplative mood, nudged the vial with his nose, sending it rolling gently across the table. Agatha laughed quietly, feeling the warmth of humor mix with lingering curiosity. The village outside basked in the soft glow of the morning, birds singing and neighbors moving about their routines. Yet Agatha felt the gentle tug of anticipation. Life in Carsely always promised both comfort and intrigue, and this small, unexplained package was a reminder that mysteries could arrive when least expected. Her reflections over tea, the calm of the cottage, and Marmalade's watchful presence all contributed to a sense of cozy security, even as a subtle spark of adventure flickered. Agatha placed the vial on the windowsill, sunlight catching the liquid inside, and gave Marmalade a knowing glance. "Well, it seems we may have more to explore soon, my friend. But for now," she poured herself another sip of tea, letting the aroma fill the room. Outside, the village hummed with its quiet charm, and inside, Agatha Raisin savored the balance of peace and possibility, knowing that while this mystery had ended, the next adventure might be just around the corner.